Hi there once again. Great to have you with us. I'm your host, Jeff Smith. This is Leading Edge. Coming up in just a few minutes, after a week like we just had, we're going to take Ohio's temperature, but we're going to do it politically. But first, Northwest Ohio is an interesting study when it comes to its schools, isn't it? As of late, a suburban Toledo district that has been growing by leaps and bounds over the last 2 decades doesn't have room for more kids. And voters there have turned down 2 straight levy requests. The money to ease overcrowding, according to Perrysburg Schools, isn't there. And the schools say despite the failure of these ballot issues, the townships and the cities continue to approve new developments in multifamily units that will lead to adding more students, and the schools cannot turn those students away. Now, the schools say money is a problem, and apparently the tax base isn't taking care of it. Now, that township that we spoke of is Perrysburg Township, who is also in the middle of things when it comes to Rossford. And Rossford's a smaller town. Perrysburg's population is about 25,000. Rossford, more around 6. But in a town where schools are not bursting at the seams, business and industry is flooding the schools with cash, and a lot of it. Relationships, the city, the schools, the township. We want to discuss that with Superintendent Dan Creps and Mayor Neil MacKinnon, both joining us here on Leading Edge today. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. This really kind of, the genesis of this discussion, and Neil, I'll start with you, is understanding the relationships that are so important to make both work. Not only the city, but make the schools work too.
Yeah, we had a head start that most people don't have. Dan and I are best friends. Our families grew up on the same street together. His wife grew up on the same street, and we've been close for 50 plus years.
So this hits close to home, not only having pride in your city, but also in how Rossford Schools do going forward, and you take that from the mayoral position going forward.
Yeah, and Danny and I both are alumnus. You know, we're born and raised there. We went to school there, K through 12. So we have that built-in love, affection, and pride for not only the city of Rossford, but also our school district, which 2/3 of it is actually in Perrysburg Township.
And you bring that up, and Dan, I've got to start off with the elephant in the room and what we have reported over the last few weeks, and that is Amazon. And saying it's going to expand even further, and to the benefit of Rossford Schools, getting $600,000 a year for the next 10 years as part of this deal.
Yeah, we're exceptionally fortunate, Jeff, to have them announce this second building. When we received the message from the first one, the fulfillment center, we were absolutely elated because, as you know, we faced significant financial challenges prior to that, but we're digging our way out of it. And with the mayor and his team and all the people involved that brought Amazon to town, and now they're announcing this second building, we couldn't be more excited. Certainly it's something now that we obviously have to be very deliberate with, very intentional on how we plan for the use of those funds.
Let me ask you a question, because I don't want to get into the inner workings. I don't want you guys to spill any secrets, but I mean, is there a moment as fellow alums that, Dan, you're knocking on Neil's door or you're texting and saying, we are at a crossroads here? I hate to use that because when you talk about the crossroads in Rossford all the time, but have you used that to say, what can we do from a business standpoint to try to help our district? Is that taboo to even make that request?
We decided years ago that our focus was not going to be on residential. More residential doesn't necessarily mean more resources and more money.
Explain what you mean by that.
It means the more people you have, the more classrooms you have to provide, the more police and fire protection you have to provide. So what we decided to do...
But let me step on that too. You said as well, just because you live here doesn't mean we're benefiting from your tax money.
That's correct. The city of Rossford has 100% income tax reciprocity. So let's say take someone like myself that actually works in Toledo. My local income tax stays in Toledo, but I live in Rossford, and Rossford has to plow my streets, pick up my garbage, and provide police and fire protection for me and my family. So we decided, again, years ago, that we were going to focus on jobs, industry, and investment. And if we could accomplish that, those jobs and that industry and that investment in the city of Rossford and Perrysburg Township would be able to fund the schools without having to go to the taxpayer. Matter of fact, our millage has gone down 3 mills in the past couple of years.
Did that knock on the door ever happen? I know you said long ago you realized what you were going to strive to achieve, but does it get to a point where schools can ask of their city leaders, hey, help us out?
I think so. I think with us, as the mayor mentioned, we've been longtime friends, so that's always been a natural part of our conversations. We're always thinking and focusing on how can we take our personal situation and improve it for everybody around us in the school, in the city, the community. So it's really been something that just came very naturally to us. We talk frequently, or it's just a lot of events together. So I wouldn't say that it was a situation where I said, hey, Mayor, we need to do something. We need your help. It's always been give and take.
Because those things need to be done 5 years ahead of time, usually, right?
Right.
It was pretty organic.
Yeah. We lean heavily on one another, and several years ago, we did a shared services study, the city and the school district, and this was before the Amazons and all these other great developments from a business perspective. And we were talking about how do we share equipment, how do we share people, how do we share buildings. We at one time were talking about a combined city council / school board of education building. With some grant funds that had been awarded to the city. And so that really was a huge genesis for us, and starting to think more deeply, more differently about how we can share those services. And it just continued to grow, and now we're here today.
Gentlemen, stay right there. When we come back here on Leading Edge, I want to talk to you about developers, I want to talk to you about land, and I also want to talk to you about levies. We'll be back right after this. Once again, talking about Rossford City business and its schools. Dan Creps, also Neil MacKinnon joining us here today. Guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I said the L word, levies. It's negative stuff for so much of Northwest Ohio when they hear that come up. But I think there's the question out there, because of this Amazon money and because of the great success that you guys have had in bringing in business and working in partnerships and enterprise zones with Perrysburg Township, that there will never or should never be another one. You're like, not so fast.
Right. It's a never say never attitude. I think what we're looking at is what's the mission of the district. We've been fortunate in that the mayor mentioned we were able to reduce our taxpayers' tax bill by around 3 mills over the last couple of years. And so with this new Amazon development, we will be very intentional, very diligent looking at that. We know that we have a 5/9 renewal coming up in 2025. We're also trying to grow programming.
Let me say it in layman's terms.
Sure.
You can't just sit there and say, we're short X amount, and let's, for lack of intents and purposes, let's put 200K. And you can't take 200K of that 600 you're going to get annually and put that toward alleviating a levy.
It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. So we try to, as every district does, I'm sure, you're trying to be very sensitive to the members of your community and the taxes that you're going out or the millage you're going out for. And typically you're only asking really for what you need to sustain the district. And you have, of course, operating expenses, and then you have your bond or your permanent improvement, kind of two separate pots. We have used these enterprise zone agreements, Jeff, to build the R as one example. We did not have to go out to the community for any new millage on that, and yet we use those dollars to fund that building to open up student opportunities and growth opportunities in the district. And then you have the operational side, right? Your lights, your operating, your staff, your insurance policies, those sorts of things, your benefit package, those are your operating expenses. So when we look at those, obviously,
which are continually going up.
Right. Yeah. And so there though is where we have looked at very carefully what can we do to ease this burden. for our taxpayers. I think that's almost unheard of what we've accomplished in the last couple of years, while at the same time trying to grow options and opportunities for our students.
Neil, I want to talk vision. I want to talk the ability. We opened up talking relationships, developers, trustees in these townships, and you having the mindset to go after the big fish, to bring that in, to create better moments for the schools.
Yeah, like I said.
Is there anything off limits?
Of course, but I can't think of anything in particular. No, I mean, again, it starts at the beginning. You have to decide who you want to be, and then you have to identify your assets. For example, Rossford sits at the interchange of I-75, the longest north-south highway, and 8090, the longest east-west highway. You can't duplicate that. We're within a day's drive of about 70% of the entire population of North America. We're kind of the epicenter, and I don't mean that in a egotistical way. I just mean in a geographic way. We are really in the center of everything, and you can get to and from just about anywhere from Rossford, Ohio. And the Gordie Howe Bridge is going to open up in 2025, and Canada's our largest trade partner, right. And we're right there. You got to drive through Rossford if you want to get on 8090 or I-75. So we have great geography. We decided we were going to focus on, again, jobs and industry and investment, and so far it's worked out great.
Go ahead.
You know the old saying, right? Build it and they will come kind of thing.
Right.
So when we, as the mayor mentioned, our facilities were in dire need when the community stepped up and graciously passed that big bond issue that resulted in the new junior, senior high, and elementary. Our enrollment has continued to climb as a result of that. And now, as you mentioned, with these new business opportunities coming, their families coming with children. So we're going to be doing another enrollment study this coming fall, late summer, early fall, to see exactly where we stand with that. Because again, with those housing developments that are coming up, to include those in our school district now, which we had never seen that before, going into the beginning of this past school year, for the first time, I think we had near 200 new residential students enroll within our district boundaries. Now, that doesn't seem a lot to some neighboring districts, the one
but
you
for
mentioned,
you
like
guys,
Perrysburg. For us, that was a big sign for us.
Dan, Neil, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Ohio has been important for the most part, if not all presidential election years. But much like the talk of tornado alley shifting that we've been having in the weather department, are we seeing trends that Ohio's importance in determining the outcome is waning? Here's my conversation this week with the editor-in-chief of Ohio Capital Journal, David DeWitt.
We talk about the temperature of the state. We know it's been hot as can be this week, but where do you see the temperature politically right now?
Ohio has been largely written off as one of the big swing states. You know, we did vote for Barack Obama twice in 2008 and 2012, but in 2016 we saw a really big shift over to supporting Donald Trump, and that continued in 2020. And so I think that the general consensus is that Ohio is expected to once again go for Donald Trump and continue to be a red state. Politically, you look at voter registrations, you look at the history of statewide races over the last, 12 years or so. We are a Republican state. I would say we're about a 55% Republican state, maybe 56%. So it makes sense that a lot of the national people watching assume that Ohio is going to be a red state. And the polls that we show most recently from the Marist poll showed that Trump had a 7-point lead in the presidential race here in Ohio, which is a pretty strong lead. It's not as strong as the 8 points that he won Ohio with in 2020. But the more interesting thing about that poll is that it showed that our Democratic U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown had a 5-point lead as well in the same poll over the Republican nominee, Bernie Moreno. And so I think what we wrote about is that there's a very good possibility that Ohioans might be doing some split ticket voting in November as far as the presidential race and the Senate race.
I'm curious, is the rural part of Ohio, is the suburban part of Ohio leading the way once again in 2024?
I think that right now in America, we're seeing the biggest rural urban divide in politics that we've ever seen, really. And we're also seeing other significant divides around education and things like that. But I think that that rural urban divide makes the suburbia really critical as far as those swing purplish counties. As you mentioned, Wood County and a lot of those counties up there along the lake, Erie and Ottawa, they've traditionally been the most swinging counties in Ohio. Those are the ones that go back and forth. They went for Obama, but they went for Trump. They went for Sherrod, but they went for J.D. Vance. So those counties, I think, are critical. Most political operatives look at them as critical. And I think that where that comes in, especially with the issues like reproductive rights and that amendment and the legal marijuana and stuff like that, we've seen for many years polls after polls showing that that's where Ohioans are at. Ohioans want some limitations on abortion care. They don't want a free-for-all, but they also don't want these incredibly strict 6-week abortion bans with no exceptions for rape and incest and that type of thing too. Like that's way too extreme for them. So I was not surprised at all in November to see 57% of voters in Ohio come out and support reproductive rights, because that's exactly what the polls have shown for years, for many years, including right before the election last year.
What are you guys honing in on heading into these last few months leading into November as far as what is driving voters to the polls? And I got to imagine economy is leading the way.
You look at what people are saying in focus groups and stuff, the economy is huge. That's up there. Yes. Saving democracy is up there as well. That has significant play with voters, whatever that means to any one individual.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you what is that? It's kind of a nebulous term, right?
It is kind of nebulous, but I think in Ohio, actually, it means something a little bit more concrete to us, because we're going to find out in the next month or so if this anti-gerrymandering amendment is going to be put forward to voters in November. And if it does, I mean, fighting against gerrymandering it's not really a partisan thing. It doesn't matter whether Democrats are gerrymandering in Illinois or Republicans are doing it in Ohio. Voters are waking up to the idea that gerrymandering really hurts representation in the state house and in the halls of power. It means that politicians are picking their voters and voters aren't picking their politicians. And then you see politicians doing things that go against the will of the majority of voters over and over again. So if voters are concerned about saving democracy, we might have this really big anti-gerrymandering amendment on the ballot in November, which I do think will drive the same coalition of people that came out last August for that special election to stop the attack on voter power over the Constitution. The same people who supported the marijuana and reproductive rights. I mean, that coalition is already built in and primed and very aware of the issue of gerrymandering. If saving democracy is a priority, then that anti-gerrymandering amendment proposal would be a really significant thing for a lot of people. And again, you might see significant split ticket. You might see people voting for Trump and then voting against gerrymandering.
So let me wrap up here for today. Once again, David joining us, Ohio Capital Journal. Let me wrap up. I can remember in 2000 watching Tim Russert on the NBC election coverage, writing Ohio, Ohio, Ohio on a marker board. That's not going to happen this year, is what you're saying going into November. You don't expect that to happen.
If Ohio suddenly became in play for the November election in the presidential, Donald Trump has some very serious things to worry about, because if Ohio is in play, then he's pretty much toast. But
why do you say that?
Well, because if you look at if you're counting the electoral college votes, I mean, almost certainly Biden's going to win the popular vote again. I suppose it's possible that he doesn't, but most likely he will. But it's all about the electoral college. Now, Biden is losing in the polls in a lot of the states that he won last time in the Southern belt. So Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. And so that makes that the states that are really in play, the ones that Biden would have to win re-election, are Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. If he wins those because of the changes after the census, we're looking at a 270 to 268 electoral college count, the closest margin we've ever seen in American history. In order to do that, Biden has to win those three states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. If any of them flip, then Trump gets the edge, and then he'll win the presidency in the electoral college. So if Ohio is in play, then that means that not only Ohio is in play, but maybe all those other states that Biden won, such as Georgia and Arizona and Nevada, those are back in play too, because those are even thought of as much more swing states than Ohio right now. So if Ohio does suddenly become in play, I would say that that would be a really bad sign for the Trump campaign, because it would basically be impossible to imagine Trump winning the presidency while losing Ohio.
Which is interesting, because we started the conversation by saying President Trump had a 7-point lead in polls. We'll be back right after this. A big thank you to Dan, Neil, and David for joining us this week. If you missed any part of our conversation any week, go to our WTOL 11 YouTube page. I'm Jeff Smith. Thanks for joining Leading Edge.